And welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 252. Today is a feedback session, so Janet and Eamonn have both sent in images, so I'm going to be giving some feedback and critique to their photos. I've also got interesting ideas for what's coming up for the rest of the month. Apologies for last week as well. Yeah, that's pretty much us. If you happen to be watching live, leave a comment, join in the chat, and well, we can make a start. So yes, and welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 252. Yes, feedback session today. So where are we at? Yes, first of all, apologies for last week. My back managed to go twang on Saturday evening, which suddenly meant that there was just no way I could sit here for long enough. As it is, it's still kind of trying to work. It's better than it was, but I might be kind of wiggling in the seat a bit, just trying to keep the hips and back going. So bear with me for that. What else was I going to say about that? Yes, well, actually, it kind of went twang for anybody who's interested, because I spent the last several days absolutely sat in deep concentration on my website. I've been updating and changing and readjusting my website, which, where should I do? I suppose we go back to here. That way. kimayres.co.uk. If after the podcast you want to go and check it out, go and take a look. Give me some feedback as well. If there's anything that kind of jolts or doesn't seem right, or anything you think, oh, that looks quite good, I like that, let me know. Yes, I could do with there's always that thing, you go through, you make all these major changes, you think you're doing the right thing, but a little bit of extra feedback wouldn't go amiss. Anyway, that to one side. We are live here on YouTube. Well, if you happen to be watching live and not the recording, but if you are live, then leave a comment. Let me know you're here. Let me know where the weather's up to where you are. Let me know where you're from as well. And just join in the chat. And if you haven't joined in the chat here before, you'll see a couple of people have already made a start. They're a friendly bunch, they don't bite, so do feel free to join in. It would be lovely to hear from you. For those who do join in, as certainly the regulars are more aware of this, there's the notion of the smug points. We accumulate the smug points each month. And you get different amounts of smug points depending on how much you contribute to these podcasts. Now, because I didn't do the podcast last week, I will tell you who the winner was for July. And it was Susan in Kakubri. So Susan managed to accumulate a grand total of 75 smug points. Well done, Susan. And Nadia got 65, and April was in third place with 55 smug points. So that meant that Susan has managed to is the one to choose the topic and challenge for this month. So that's all been worked out, so I'll tell you more about that at the end of the podcast. So stick around, or if you can't stick around, remember to come back later to check it out. So I can see we've got a few people in here already. Nadia says hi everyone. April says greetings from a beautiful sunny day on Long Island, New York. Marilyn says hello from a sunny Colorado. Janet joins us from a hot, humid, sunny Mississauga in Canada. Already 28 degrees at 9:30 a.m. going up to 33. That sounds warm. Stacey says, oh, welcome, Stacey, not seen you for a wee while. Says, good morning, summer cool morning, a lovely 66 degrees, been very busy lately. I also have spinal issues. Sorry to hear that. Stacey, a bad back is, it's not fun at all. Right, okay. So, what are we going to do? So, yes, okay, so, smug points, introductions. I suppose let's make a start. So what we're going to start with, actually, I'll tell you what, before we get on to the feedback, Viji isn't here yet. I don't know. I'm not sure whether Viji's going to get a chance to join in straight away, but I did want to show you, first of all, now, if you remember, last month we did the Power of Two. Now, hold on one sec. I want to do this. And that was our challenge. Now, Viji put in a couple of little ballerinas on it in the music box. But one of the things she'd also been doing was she had been making a set. This was one of her ideas. And she had sent me the image. And I thought it was such a lovely image that although we didn't show it last week, I did want to show it this week. So if I do that and I do that, then hopefully you can see this wonderful image from Viji. I can see I'm kind of cutting part of the head off. Tell you what, let's do that, minimize that, and let me just, I don't know why I've got those bits. Okay, so here we go, just to give you a better sense of what's going on. And yeah, I thought this was just huge amounts of fun. So Viji said, I took this still life photos for the Power of Two challenge. The interaction between the dolls is more about spending time together, experiencing a movie, relaxing, sharing popcorn and a cookie, which started off as a donut and turned into a cookie. And the thing about this is that Viji made the set. She took the doll, she made the popcorn, she made the cookies, set up the iPhone with the Sound of Music, sitting down for the movie. I just thought it was brilliant. Over the years, we've seen different little kind of creations from Viji, and she just loves kind of getting into in the model making, kind of playing around with, making scenes, still life in a way. But yeah, I thought it was a lot of fun. So anyway, actually, I'll tell you what, I'm going to give Viji a bonus 5 smug points. 5 smug points to Viji. I'll make a note of that. For this one, because it did make me smile. Yeah. So anyway, yes, I did want to show you that, because although it didn't make it into, although she chose a different photo for the Power of Two challenge, that one did put a smile on my face. Right, okay, so what have we got? Robert's joined us. Says, good morning from a sunny and Jot, North Texas. Not sure Jot is the right word. Hot. I would imagine it's a hot North Texas. Where have we got? April says she is funny. Stacey says very cute, and Marilyn says very cute image. Right. Okay. So let's make a start then on the notion of the feedback. So what we're going to start with is Eamonn. So Eamonn sent me a couple of images, but we'll start with this one, I think. And so Eamonn sent in this image and says it was taken in Skerries, Dublin, Ireland, looking for a little feedback on the composition and what could be done to achieve a good photo through cropping. And Robert said it is very Jot in Texas, so Jot my H has melted. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. If you're reading it, go read the comment, it makes more sense. Okay, right, so back to Eamonn and this photo. So what we've got here is we've got a lovely sunset over the coast. We've got reflections in a very calm sea. One of the problems that we do have with this photo, though, is it is extraordinarily noisy, and the resolution feels quite low. So that automatically means there's a limit to what we can do with this. Now, the image he sent me, I think it's about 4,000 pixels across or something like that. So, by rights, it should be big enough to play around with a little bit. But unfortunately, I don't have the EXIF information with this, so I don't know what ISO level he had or what the other settings were on the camera. But the main problem with this is, though I think that you've got a good start to it, because of this low quality, high noise level, it means there's a limit to what you can do with it, how far you can go with it, if you want to do anything. I mean, you can get away with it as a phone picture, because this, I zoom back out here, depending on the size of your screen, it's maybe not quite so noticeable how noisy it is. But if you went to print this, it would just be awful. It's not a printable level of image. But in terms of crop, what can we do with it? Because the first thing that strikes me with this is we have the wall. We've got a little sea wall and a bit of road here. And by the look of the kind of odd colour, sort of slightly greenish, yellowish tint to it, I'm imagining that's probably a bit of street light or something that's just lighting up the wall. And it is completely out of keeping. In a way, with something like this, I think you'd be much better just crossing the road, take the photo, so that you get more of the sea in. It also means that when we get like the reflection of this mast here, that you get the tip of the reflection of the mast. So let's open this in Photoshop And what we'll do, I'll sort of close that one for Viji. What we'll do first of all is just play with the crop and say, well, what, because that's part of what you're on about, is what could you do with the crop? Now, the problem we have here is if we crop out the whole wall, you see, we've actually, that thing becomes entirely sky, and we don't want that much sky, because really the main part of the picture is this bit. It is the boat, and it's the colourful bit of sky behind it. So in that case, if we were cropping out the wall, we'd have to bring this down to at least here, where we've kind of got a rule of thirds, very panoramic. So if you can either then keep the boat centered and just have a bit of headland over here, a little bit of the pier coming in there, maybe pull that down a little bit, something like that. And I would say, so your crop would be something like that. And I think that's not a bad crop. That kind of gives you this sort of symmetrical, slightly asymmetrical sense of sky, sense of reflection. But like I say, what would be nice with something like this would be if it was actually from here, if we did content aware fill, just drag that down a little bit, something like that. In fact, if you sort of took it somewhere like that, you can see then that just having that extra little bit of space underneath, I think kind of makes it slightly more interesting as well. Other options with this would be to, that's going with well, okay, do it there, then you've got this absolutely dead center. But other options with this would actually be to kind of go rule of thirds. So what you could do is you could bring this boat over to here. In fact, actually, I'll tell you what, let's go back a bit, so we've got more to play with. Let's go back to the open. And so if what we were to do was to bring this up to here, bring this over to here, and what you're trying to do here is basically get your boat onto the thirds point here. Tuck that bit in a little bit, maybe you are, that's okay. Let's say we did that, and then what I will do here is I'll just use this tool here to take out this bit of wall. Hopefully it should give us something. This is just very rough, but that's another sense of a potential crop for you as well, is this idea of having the boat in that kind of rule of thirds, and then that way you've got the vertical over here, and over on the third to the right you've got the horizontal of the jetty, the pier, coming out. So I think really when you're talking about crop, your crop options are either this kind of off to one side, or you're talking about keeping it center aligned. But the key thing here is about essentially trying to remove this bit of wall. And if you remove that wall, whether you're using generative fill, whether you're using eraser tools, whether you're using any of these other bits and pieces, I think that's kind of where you're at with that. But the main, like I say, if we go back to the original image, a lot of this could have been solved by just literally walking across the road and standing so that that little bit of seawall is at your knees, your shins, rather than having it in the way. And I suppose ultimately what we're talking about here is to come back to this notion that I've talked about many times, which is, what is the narrative? What is the story? What is the bit? When this point where we bring our camera or our phone up to our eyes and we see the scene before us, if we can take a little moment to go, what is it about this photo, this scene that's made me want to pull out my camera? And if you can identify it in that moment, then it makes every decision you make subsequently much, much easier. So in this case, you're looking at it and you're going, it's the sky, it's the reflection of the sky, but it's also that boat in the middle and that reflection there. And now you go, okay, that's the story, is the boat, the reflection, the sea and the sky, but that boat is a key part and its relationship to where the jetty or the pier is. Now I know that. What can I do to enhance that narrative? What do I need to remove that's detracting from that narrative, which in this case is the seawall and the road? And slightly further down the line, which is if I want to be able to show this off and print it, what are the camera settings? Is the ISO way too high, so it's just going to be too noisy, such that I couldn't put this into my camera club as a printed version because the quality isn't there. So that's kind of where I would go with that. So hope that makes sense, Eamonn. I mean, lovely spotted moment, and I'm sure all of us there, we'd have seen the boat, we'd have taken the photo, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of idea of what you might have done next. Meg's joined us, says hello everyone. Stacey says she loves boats, and April says very pretty skies. Now actually Eamonn did send in a second one originally as well, although he didn't have, now let me just try and sort of find that. And as we've only had 2 people send in images, I will take a quick look at this one as well, because this is also about a crop. We just wanted to know basically how you would crop and edit this image. So now this is a slight, again, it's not a high resolution one. There is also something to do with the way that he sent it over. It looks like it's a faint kind of copyright thing running through the middle of that. I'm not going to attempt to remove that. That's entirely up to you. The idea of this photo, though, is a nice one. The silhouette, the man on the paddleboard, the boat in the background. What I would say with this is, again, you go, well, what is the key thing here? So you've got the silhouette here, that's good. You've got space in front of him, that's good. You've got the boats in the background, which give a sense of that this is happening on a river or an estuary. That's good. What's distracting? What's distracting us from this is partly probably another wall or some kind of object in the foreground, which is capturing our attention, and also where the sun is reflecting over on the right here. This great big white patch that's going to blown highlights. It's not necessarily that, well, the main thing about the blown highlights is that it's grabbing all our attention. Where we want our attention is on the silhouette of the person on the paddleboard. But what's competing with our attention is the bright white patch over on the right. So, and then what's also kind of catching our eye a little bit, when everything else is water reflections and silhouettes, is this little lump in the foreground. So again, let's just open this with Photoshop and see if we can just tidy up the crop. Also, we've also got a bit of horizon over here, which isn't quite straight and is dark and isn't necessarily adding anything to the picture. So if what we do with this, the first thing we do is just tilt that a fraction so that we've got it level. But then I think what we can do is we can crop that bit out. That's fine. That's not really adding anything to the picture. We can maybe crop up here, but the thing is, if we crop all the way above the this lump in the front, then we actually don't have enough room for the paddleboard, and you do need, and I quite like, about that amount of size behind it. So I think the only way around this is we're going to have to come in and edit that bit. So we crop that, and then we can either, quick edit, do something like that. Just see what that does. Okay, now you can go in and edit it however you like, but this idea where we've got a little bit of reflection coming down, I think works okay. The next problem we've got is this large patch over here. Now, one of the things we can do here is I can come here, I can select, say, that orange colour. Now, if I just take the paintbrush and then paint on top of it, obviously it looks false and naff. So what we want to be able to do, the best thing to do here is create a separate layer. On the separate layer, paint over the white patch in your colour. Now we've got it on a separate layer, what we could do is we can play with that separately. We can play with different things. So first of all, what I can do, I can reduce the opacity a bit so we can see a little bit of the patch underneath. What we're wanting to do is try and blend it in. So we've got different blend modes in Photoshop: normal, darken, multiply. That starts to be interesting. Colour burn, lighten, and different ones work at different levels depending on what you're trying to do with it. Obviously not something like that. So if we come to something like multiply, what multiply does is it's kind of creating it darker, but it's also blends in a little bit more than, okay, right. If we do darken, what it does is anything that is lighter than the colour that we've placed, it turns into that colour. But if we do multiply, it sort of gradates. Now, that works fine over on this bit, but then it goes a bit funny over here. So what I will do, I'll reduce it a little bit more. We don't want it, that's too white. That's too gone far the other way. So what we want to do is we just want to kind of take it to a point whereby it's not going to be distracting. But now we can see where it's, where the line is as such. So if we mask that, so I go over to here, go to black, make sure that I've got, so when I put apply black, what that's going to do is it's going to show what's underneath, okay? But if I take that down to something like 33% or something like that, make this, and I just sort of lightly feather in over where it's just gone a little bit too orange, then we can just sort of gradate it, if you like, a little bit, something like that. And in fact, if I swap that back so that's white on top, I can gradate back out again. And because it's at 33%, it just keeps it kind of soft. Okay, now that still feels slightly painted in, so maybe if I just drop it down a little bit more. I think what we're trying to do here is judge the point whereby we're getting rid of the bright white, but it's not looking completely false. So we're playing around with that, and you have, at some point along the line, you make a personal judgment. And I'm, for the sake of this, I'm going to make a judgment of, in this case, around about 28%. So it is still bright, maybe actually just a fraction darker, but it's not as bright as it was. Now what I can do, if I copy all those onto a fresh layer, if I then go into filter, camera raw filter, what I might do is take the optics and just add a little bit of a vignette, and the vignette's going to sort of darken the corners and it darkens the edges just a fraction more, something like that. I think what I might also do with this is take the contrast a little bit more, boost the contrast, make the silhouette slightly stronger. What that also does is it boosts the colour somewhat. So now we've got, but I will show you one more thing that we can do. If I go up to here, if I go to, if we change the colour balance, because if I was to go to colour and do auto colour, you see it turns it to very blue, but we lose some of that yellow. But if I now mask that and then softly paint back in some of the blue, maybe just up in this corner over here, maybe take that a little bit softer, make that a little bit larger. I just want to kind of gradate it a little bit, something like that. And then what we have, which I think is quite interesting, is we have the sort of rich yellows on this side, but there's a touch of blue going up into the shadows on the left, and now we end up with this, there's a kind of richer level of colour. Now it's entirely up to you. You might decide that you want to sort of stick with the gold and black all the way through, but sometimes adding that little bit of blue almost kind of emphasises that sense of the yellows and the golds in it as well. So there we go, a couple of ideas here. Again, the main things here being that what's distracting from the key narrative, and two things that were distracting here. One is the bright patch. It still feels a bit bright to me. I might want to play around with it a little bit more, see if I can look for ways to effectively darken it. The problem is I can't crop it because then we lose the balance of the picture. The other part was that, again, the bit down in the foreground, a little bit again like a kind of sea wall or edge wall, which was eating into the picture. Exactly the same problem that you had with your boat in the harbour as well. So the foreground was eating into the picture. And again, a step forward, a lean forward, a stretch your arms forward to get a little bit closer to the image, and then thereby removing some of the objects that are in the way and destroying the composition. So I hope that helps there, Eamonn, and it gives you some ideas to think about. But yeah, thanks for sending that in. What have we got here? April says some of the best shots are in dangerous places and you can't get to. Well, that's always the case. It's like if you're, it's like at the moment the brambles, the blackberries are coming out on the briars, And the best ones are always just out of reach, past the really spiky thorns, leaning over the stinging nettles, trying to find your way past the spiders and the wasps and everything else. And the best ones are always out of reach. But in terms of photography, that's what zoom lenses are for. So invest in a zoom lens, and then that way you're maybe more likely to get into the places that you can't actually get physically close enough to. What else we got? Oh, Meg says, I really like the silhouettes on the water, and April says, very defined. Right, so yes, quick reminder then that if you find these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining, and would like to support them, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can do it. And just as a wee thing for anybody who's interested, I discovered the other day an option with Buy Me a Coffee, so that if you are one of these who buys me a coffee, say once a month, then but then you kind of go, I can't remember what day of the month it is. Then I've now opened up an option that if you want to do the Buy Me a Coffee, there is a little box you can tick to say make this monthly. If you do it every week, then you can multiply it by 4 and then do monthly. But that's entirely up to you. It's just an option there that I discovered. Right, okay, so what are we going to do now? So now we're going to move on to Janet. Now, Janet says, I've attached an image for critique. And so let's flip back over to here, find Janet's image. No, not that one. Where do we go? Go to that one. Yes, there we go. So this is Janet's image, and this version of it's quite a small one. She has sent me the larger original. But here it is. She says, I've attached an image for critique. It is of an image of a few fishing boats in Digby, Nova Scotia. I tried desaturating the image without going to black and white, and I'm undecided whether I like the effect or not. My second question is whether you have any ideas how to vary the processing, since I have a lot of fishing boat in the fog or mist images coming up, and I don't want them to all look the same. So, okay, let's pull up. So that's and this is the original. So you can see that what she's done as I don't know quite why that's gone. That no, still going to do that. That's fine. I will open the original in Photoshop then, and that should be fine. There we go. So what we can see here is she's straightened it. It had a kind of, because of whatever colour balance was doing, it's got a sort of slight green cast. She's realigned the cast, made it sort of more natural. But what she's really done is cropped in really close. So we have the boats, we have the the boats and the reflections. But I will say with this particular crop, Janet, that it does feel very close in. It feels like you've not really given it room to breathe, so to speak. So if we come back to here, well, first of all, let's just do the auto color. This has made it slightly yellower than I would have. So if I just drag that back into the blues a bit, I think we end up with slightly more neutral color here. And we'll just open that like that. And then what we can do is we can just straighten it. So what we're doing is trying to find a compromise, which is between whether the pier jetty is flat, but also we're looking at these masts coming up and making sure that they are on the vertical rather than, or something that bit's on the vertical just makes it look slightly more. It's done a content aware fill, right? Still had that there. Okay, doesn't matter. So this, in essence, then is our starting point. Now, the fact is with this is that the mist is a kind of a key component to it. And so the question is then, what do we want to do with this? Now, one of the things Janet said was she takes the hue saturation, desaturates it a little bit. Now, you can take it down to full black and white, which certainly makes it moody and atmospheric. You can boost the colours, which looks terrible. Or sort of semi-desaturate, and that's kind of taking the fog and just emphasizing that notion of the desaturation. So that's one of the things you can do. But there's also a kind of where do we go with this? Let's just duplicate that layer, because let's take it back into Camera Raw filter, because there are other places you can go. I mean, one of the effects it has here is to dehaze. And if I dehaze, it sort of essentially removes most of the mist. If I go the other way, it sort of adds more in. Now, the dehazing can be quite good under certain circumstances, where sometimes when you don't really want the haze, maybe there's a reflection or there's something But to be honest, I think when we dehaze it like that, we actually lose the sense of the mist. We lose the fog, which is the key part of this photo. We also start to notice there is actually a bit of hill in the background. You can see the mist a little bit more. But the thing is with this is it's the misty bit which is really what's making it work. And I can't help but think that whereas what you did was you sort of zoomed in and went close, that actually you could almost go further back and make more of the mist. But again, to get to the point of what's the story here? The story is the boat's at the jetty in the mist. So there's two ways you can go about this, because generally speaking, most photos either tend to be not close enough or not far enough away. Now, what you did with your crop was you went into here and cropped it close. But I think, to be honest, if you were going to go in, then... sorry, wrong one. Where are we? Sorry, my webcam happens to be sitting right in front of my toolbar as I'm trying. I'm not very well organised here. And I think if you kind of like really go into where the boats are, something like this, you get that absolutely, the fill the frame idea. The fill the frame, maybe we get the reflections, we get the bits and pieces, we have the bit of light here, we get that sense of the fog, the mist. I think that makes an interesting one. The other one is to step out a bit. And again, if I go to my crop here, and if we were to just extend this a little bit, and let's put it on content aware fill, and say pull that up a little bit. Let's just see what that does. And yeah, this is always taking some, there's this sort of sense of actually having more space. Now, we've got to be careful about going too far with this, because if we end up with this big massive space and then there's only a tiny little bit of the pier left, then we've kind of lost it. But if you take something like this, for example, I quite like this. There's something about what we're doing here is we're emphasizing the idea of you've got the boats and you've got the jetty or the pier, the harbour wall. But part of that story is how it's lost in the mist. And the mist is that kind of sense of nature being bigger than us. Doesn't matter what we fill our lives with, doesn't matter how important we think we are. If we've got a fishing boat, we are subject to the whims of the weather. We don't really have, we have to react to that. We can't control the weather. And as such, making the mist that little bit bigger makes the boat seem that little bit smaller, that little bit more vulnerable, I think. So I would consider this idea of, rather than cropping in the way that you did, is to actually maybe even pull back and get more space around it. The alternative is to zoom right in the boats and have that kind of fill the frame option, I think. Now, in terms of editing, I mean, what you've asked here is whether you could sort of do, you've got quite a few misty boats. Are there different ways of editing? Well, there's always hundreds of different ways of editing. The question is whether you want to do a set where they are all related. If they're all going to be related, then if you've got, so you want to have, say, a set of 6 photos, then at that point, maybe what you do is, you make sure they are cropped to the same ratio and that they have the same color grading and feel to them, and then they will all feel the same, same level of desaturation or color shifts or whatever it is you want to do, and then that way the photos will feel like a part of a set. Otherwise, it's down to the individual photo and how you decide to do that individual photo. So another photo that Janet sent was this one, as gave me a link to as an example, which is another fishing boat in the mist. This one's sitting on Janet's Flickr account. And again, if I just open that in Photoshop, so this one's in colour. With this, I tend to feel, again, I would like a little bit more space. If we were to just pull that up a little bit now, I think we need a little bit more down the bottom, just a little bit of space here. So this really, again, once again, kind of sitting in that thirds position, something like that. Hit enter, we'll see. Yeah, there we go. And I think, does it need a slight tilt? Yeah, maybe a slight tilt, something like that. And now I think there's that little bit more space around the boat. Again, makes it feel like it's disappearing off into the mist. Then in terms of, wrong one, Control J is what I was trying to do here, which is to duplicate the layer. Again, where you decide to go with this, if we go to, let's just bring this up in Camera Raw filter. If you do the dehaze, you make the boat much sharper. Also tends to go way over the top with the contrast, with the colour. So you might then want to go to your colour and then desaturate it a little bit. But if we go back, let's go back to the effects. Let's take off that dehaze. I don't like that. Because we like the mist here. Now, again, you can go black and white. In this case, you can go with a black and white mixer, play around with whether you want to make your oranges darker or lighter, pick around, play with the colours, see what works, see what doesn't. Or if we take off the black and white and go to the colour and then take off the black and white, that's what I meant to do, go to the colour. Again, you can play around with not tint, saturation, desaturate it, take it down to full black and white, or just kind of have it semi or something like that. It kind of depends where you want to go with it. Play around with the vibrance, play around. But if you're talking about an individual photo, what you're doing is you're looking for what's going to work for that image. And for this image, you might decide to have it desaturated completely, go for black and white, or you might decide to allow the colour to stay within it. You might decide to take the effects, boost the clarity, things like that. That kind of looks a bit, don't like that at all. But it does kind of become, it's about the individual image. For this matter, you could even kind of go cinematic if you wanted. Although, don't really like that. To be honest, for me, I think that slightly bigger crop that we've done here, just to give that little bit more space of that sense of it disappearing into the mist, works at its best. And I guess I probably would quite like to go black and white with it. And then brightness, contrast. What happens if I do the contrast? Yeah, a little bit of contrast there, something like that. I think that creates quite an interesting image. Maybe if I did levels. Oh yeah, here we go. We can brighten that up to about there. We can darken that. Oh wow, just a touch. But so it's funny. I'm looking at it on here and it looks fine. I looked over onto the small little screen, and as a small screen image, that doesn't look very good at all. I don't like that so much. We'll brighten it up, something like that. Again, yes, it's kind of where it is on the screen size as well that you're playing with. But in essence, I guess, Janet, that what it comes down to is your question about, are there different ways? There's always different ways of editing, and every single picture is going to lend itself to, might lend itself to more than one style of imagery, but it kind of depends what you're wanting. If you're wanting a group, then you edit the group the same way. So you're doing 6 photos of boats in the mist, edit them with the same crop ratio, have the boats in roughly the same position, have the same kind of colour grading, or whatever it is that you want to do with it. Then they will seem like a set. If it's just a single one-off photo, then play with that photo. Do it in black and white, do it in colour, do it with stronger contrast, do it with less contrast, build the space around it, or zoom in on the detail. And see what works, see what feels right. There's always places to play, but then what's going to really come out is what you feel most comfortable with, because your aesthetic is the most important part of your photography. chatting away with my wife this morning, actually, over breakfast. We were talking about this notion of creativity, whether it's photography, whether it's art, whether it's acting, whether it's music. There's two sides to it. One is the technical side, which in our case as photographers is understanding focus, ISO, aperture, shutter speed, various compositional techniques. And the other side of it is aesthetic, is what is it that makes you go, ooh? What is it that you particularly get drawn to? Now, sometimes that's in genre, but more than that, it's, whether you like street photography or wildlife photography or portrait photography, you will get drawn. But then there's particular aspects to whatever those kinds of photography which make you excited, which get you interested. There's no point in doing the photography if it's just, I'm going through the motions, I'm going through the paces, I'm just joining the dots, but I'm not really enjoying it. What is it you're getting out of it? And once you understand what you're getting out of it, then that also helps your next set of decisions to be made, if that makes sense. Let me take a quick look at the comments here. What else do we have? Oh, Viji joined us and said good evening, everyone. I think that was possibly a little while ago. Where else? A little bit of chat there. April says she likes the foggy boat. Viji's talking about it being evening in Chennai. And they're chatting about sunset times. Okay, Nadia says, I like the minimalist style of this image. Janet says, where are we? I think I have one in the next set for editing where I shot wide and will be able to have more space around the boat. Okay, that sounds good. Viji says, tricky to shoot during the fog, but the photos have come out good. Okay, excellent. Right. So, hopefully then, Janet, that's been kind of useful for you. Ultimately then what we're talking about is this notion of boats in the fog. Really, the fog is the key, the boat is one part of the subject, the fog is another part of the subject. So what's the relationship between the two? And whatever relationship you want, whether it's mostly about the boat and then, with a little bit of fog, or it's about the boat in the fog, or it's really all about the fog with a hint of a boat. What's the relationship between the boat and the fog? And then how do you maximize, emphasize, really draw out, enhance that narrative? Understand the narrative first, and then every decision becomes sorry, I'm really slow this afternoon. Every successive decision becomes easier. Hope that all makes sense. Right, April says, all right, chatting away, still over time and seasons and dinner time, I think. Okay, so thank you then both to Eamonn and to Janet for sending in images, and to the rest of you throwing in your comments and watching, and hopefully the rest of you all learning something about it as well. This is the great thing about the notion of feedback sessions. You get to get direct feedback on your own images, which is the best form of way of learning that you possibly can. If you get direct feedback from a professional photographer who knows roughly what they're talking about. The other thing is that when you send in images, it helps other people, because whatever you're struggling with, sooner or later somebody else in the group is going to be struggling with it, and so it really helps. So because of that, you also then get a bonus 25 smug points. Both you and Eamonn will get the 25 smug points for sending in an image too. So let's talk a little bit about what's coming up for the rest of the month. It being a 5 podcast month. However, we lost one last week because of my back. So we're back into the 4. This is the equivalent of the first one. Now, the next week then. So we come back to Susan won the smug points for July. And we've had a little bit of back and forth about possibilities and ideas. And basically what we're going for is the idea of negative space. Now, I have done a couple of podcasts in the past on the notion of negative space and minimalism, and then I have set a challenge for the minimalism side of it. So negative space I've generally talked about in conjunction with minimalism, as minimalism being the main part of it, and then negative space, how that works into minimalism. But this time round, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be emphasizing the notion of negative space. What is it? How do you make it work for you? What do you need to keep into consideration? So next week, I'm going to be talking about negative space. From that, I will then set a challenge for 2 weeks following. So for the 31st of August, then will be the negative space challenge. So make sure you tune in next week, find out everything you can about negative space, because actually, as I've been looking into this and really investigating into it, rather than just doing a kind of a surface talk, which is what I've done last time, I've found that there's a lot of really interesting ways you can be thinking about it and using it as another tool available to you for your photography. When you come across a scene, when you start thinking not just about the subject, but about the space around or between the subject or subjects, then it can really change your mindset and how you view the image in front of you. So negative space is what that's all about. Now, in between, normally I do a feedback session, but Susan had this other idea, and this is one that I would really like to explore, but it's only going to work if you, yes, you, contribute, okay? And that is niche or generalist, right? And essentially, Susan's idea, one of the things she said was that you get these conflicting kind of reports. Are you better off finding a particular topic, subject, style, and then really going for it and becoming a master, a specialist in that? Or are you better pushing yourself outside your comfort zone, going into these other areas which aren't necessarily your speciality, becoming more generalist, trying out lots of different things? And there's debate on either side of this. So what I thought we would do is I would like to have more of a kind of a discussion on this. So in that sense, and I'll talk more about this next week, but I would like your input. I would like your input into what you think is the best way, or any interesting things, or if you have any questions, or if you have anecdotes, examples, anything like that, about whether you feel it's better to take one idea, say, right, I'm going to do portraiture and now I'm going to become the best in portraiture, or I'm going to do macro wildlife and that's what I'm going to become a specialist in. Or is it better to really stretch yourself across lots of different genres, lots of different styles, and what have you? And I don't think there's a single answer for this. I think so much is going to depend on your personality as well. But what that means is that there's plenty of room for debate, and there's going to be plenty of viewpoints on this, that different people are going to have ideas on this which somebody else won't have considered. So if you've got any thoughts on this, then your input will be greatly valued. If this works, if this idea of actually having kind of an idea up for debate and lots of different inputs into it actually works, then this opens up another thread for these podcasts, that periodically we can have a discussion topic, which I think could be fun. And then we can open up to ideas of what topics is it you would really like to discuss, rather than necessarily a specific thing you want to learn about in terms of, how to create this kind of photograph. So that will be coming up. But like I say, we'll talk more about that next week. However, next week's will be about the idea of negative space. Where are we at? Okay, still chat between April and Viji. Viji says, good topic for challenge. I absolutely love minimalism. Yes, but minimalism is only one part of it. Ultimately, this is about negative space, and there is a difference between negative space and minimalism. But of course, that's what I will be chatting about. So you can also then start having a think about how you might respond to the challenge as well. Right, okay, so that's pretty much it. Thank you to Eamonn and to Janet for sending in their images. And I'm going to have to kind of go off and stretch my back a little bit, and I think I've been distracted by that. I'm aware that it's been a slightly tougher podcast for me, this. So thank you for your patience. But I look forward to seeing you all next week. Take care. Bye-bye. No, not that one. Where are we going? I need to do that one. Cheerio.